Many postulations have been proffered with regards to the viability, feasibility, and desirability of Mthwakazi independence. Furthermore, people differ on the form and shape of independence sought. Some prefer what is called devolution of power, some opt for federalism, yet some prefer outright secession. Recently, there have been calls for what is called irredentism, that is for Mthwakazi to join South Africa as a province. Today, we are going to delve deeper into the feasibility, viability, and desirability of an independent and sovereign Mthwakazi state. Gentlemen, I welcome you on Mthwakazi Broadcasting Corporation. Today we are going to discuss a very, very difficult question. Some they call it a sensitive question. Some they say it's a controversial question. However, for Mthwakazi, I think it is an apt question. It is a very, very relevant question. That is independence of Mthwakazi. How feasible is it? How viable is it? Is it desirable? So these are the questions that I would like you to answer today. But before that, let me come to you, Baba Sosha, to introduce yourself. Who are you? Which organization do you represent here? Thank you, sir.
Hi, siyabonga Babunkala. Yeah, my name is Sosha Mpunzi. I'm a politician at heart, and sometimes I would like to think I want to be an academic. But in my capacity as the interim chair of the alliance of Mthwakazi political parties called Mthwakazi People's Alliance, an actual alliance that is different perspectives of how to address this issue of succession. Within us, there are some parties that are pro-succession, pro-voting. Some others are political parties that are currently functioning as activist pressure groups. But nonetheless, regarding succession in particular, we view succession as a remedy. It's a remedial solution to a situation where it has become a moral imperative in a country where I would say for most the chief architect of the mass matter of our people is being celebrated as a hero. Our streets are being named after a Robert Mugabe, who is the chief architect of Gukurahundi, together and his comrades in mass matter who have not been ever prosecuted, including the sitting state president. It's a remedial action. Yes.
Okay, ngicela ukuthi ngiqale ngamukela ubaba uNdlovu as introducer, then we'll come to you and you start your presentation. Baba Ndlovu. Sawubingelela ba.
Sanibona babunkala nabalandeli nababukeli ngasemakhaya. Hayi ngiyalibonga leli thuba. Igama lami nguPhilani Mthandana Mthwakazi. Ngisakhamuzi sakoMthwakazi. Ngazalelwa khona, ngakhulela khona, namanje ngizibona ngiyisakhamuzi. Isifiso sami ukuthi ngibone abantu bakithi bephila ngenkululeko nabo ngelinye ilanga, ngoba ngibona sengathi into abasebahlezi beyifisa kuyiphupho elingafezekanga. ngesinye isikhathi ngisasemfishane ngisafinyela esihlathini amathemba ayephezulu ngoba sasibabona abafana bezipra begqoka usibakhulula ijambo leliyana elikhulu elibiza bethi ngisibakhulula bephethe ibhazuka liyana elemaka eyayilehlamvu elikhulu kanye ne-AK-47 lena inemagazini eyayijika ngathi ijika njengesandla lapha ngezansi. Laba abasebekhona bayayikhumbula leyo nto. Kwakuculwa impela ingoma ezaziletha amathemba. Kodwa-ke kuthe mase kufika leso sikhathi sikazibuse ngo-1980, hhayi bathi abelungu kwatholakala ukuthi the baby was thrown away with the bathwater. Abantu babuye bazithola sebehlikihla iy'nyembezi sokuqala phansi. So ngisakhamuzi nje selokhu ngaqala ukubuka ngisukela lapho nginesifiso sokuthi kanti ngenye imini iyoziphele nini lento. Abantu bakithi baze bayibone nini inkululeko nabo. Obaba bazalwa baphila baze bafa bashiye. Nathi sesicuthunwele olumhlophe silokho singakayiboni. Kodwa hhayi mhlawumbe ngokuhamba kwesikhathi uNkulunkulu uzosivezela amathemba. Sisheshe sikubone lokho okufiswa ngamahlabezulu. Ake ngime lapho kwamanje.
Siyabonga kakhulu baba Ndlovu. Baba Sosha asize kuwe usinikeze ipresentation yakho. Then after that ubaba uNdlovu uzosinikeza ipresentation yakhe. Then after that we will engage both presentations at the same time. Siyabonga kakhulu.
All right, ngizoshare iScreen sami lana on what I have prepared. Learning is the tuber. Okay, my screen one. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, boy.
Now we look here as far as succession is concerned. We know that the Zimbabwean government doesn't explicitly recognize, allow, disagree, or agree with succession. But the general principle is, when we look here at the international law of succession, we have got basically 3 items under the United Nations Charter, 1945, Article 1 of 2, that affirms self-determination of peoples, and Article 55 with regard to equal rights of self-determination, and the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights of 1966. All peoples have the right of self-determination. They may freely determine their political status. Now, the UN General Assembly Resolution 2625, which speaks about friendly declarations, it means when people are subjected to subjugation, domination, or exploitation, they've got the right to self-determination. Otherwise, it says these people have the right to free themselves from their oppressor. More so in a state where ethnocentric majoritarianism is the one that takes precedence, where the national memory or where what is valued mostly, or in terms of icons, we know that Mugabe is celebrated by the majority, so-called majority Shona people.
Baba Mpunzi.
Yeah, Baba.
Iphathi evelile lapha i-conclusion number 6.
Number 6.
Yeah.
I'm sharing the wrong screen. I'm sharing the wrong screen.
I think it might be the right screen, but it's the right screen.
I'm supposed to be.
Excellent.
So, sorry, I'm supposed to be here. I don't know, maybe you're gonna edit that out. But okay. This is what I'm looking at when it comes to international law. The UN General Assembly Resolution 2625. People subjugated to subjugation, domination, and exploitation have got the right to self-determination. Now, we know that the Zimbabwean constitution does not provide for that, neither does it go against it. But international law will always take precedence over a situation where people are exploited and where the context or the meaning of so-called unity, according to the Zimbabwean government, is essentially assimilating to Shonaness, where anything that seeks to exist outside of this ethnocentric superstate is deemed as a threat to this Shona superstate, is actually crushed, for the lack of a better word, as they usually say, that Mthwakazi will be crushed. The only solution that is left is remedial succession. Remedial succession says when all avenues that seek to bring about redress to issues of injustices, issues of marginalization, and instances of extreme human rights abuses, just like the Gukurahundi itself. For example, where the perpetrators seek to impose and become judge and jury. These three particular tenets that we are using are satisfied. It means as far as it does qualify under international law to seek self-determination under peaceful means and go to the United Nations Security Council, present its case that Mthwakazi is a people that cannot, under the current circumstances or the foreseeable future, get enough political power to bring about national justice and redress to the past atrocities aimed at the people, knowing that we've got 38 seats versus the 217 seats nationally. That means we will never have any noticeable political power to change things or policy at a national level. The only solution that we need, that we're left with, according to the political alliance, or at least some political parties, is the remedial succession, where we're succeeding so that we can gain our own independence and self-determination in pursuance of our healing from the atrocities that have been inflicted upon us by the Zimbabwean government. Nyabo.
Okay, siyabonga kakhulu. Is it the only document that you want to share for now?
Yeah, okay, I know I can. Now, there are key precedents, of course. We have got South Sudan that succeeded from Sudan. We know Kosovo, we know Eritrea in there. And just as I was saying, that Gukurahundi itself is a catalyst for this. Not that we are saying as MPA that if Gukurahundi is resolved fair and fair, we will stop with the succession narrative. We see succession as a continuation of the interrupted process in 1893 by the colonialists of us becoming a state. So that alone cannot be dismissed. So we are saying that the implication whereby we have had so many social groups that have raised the issue about Gukurahundi, and even as far as went to the High Court of Bulawayo. You have seen Izapu. Those are examples where we actually have been exhausting internal processes within the ambit of the law in the country, and we have not been successful. And those Gukurahundi hearings that are currently happening, they represent the epitome of the lack of accountability by those that are perpetrators of the actual genocide and the continued marginalization of our people. I'll just share briefly what it means now internationally. What does it take for us to be recognized as a people or a group of people that are affected and that do qualify or certify the
Baba Mpunzi,
criteria of being
ngicela
a country?
ube duze kwe-microphone yakho.
Yes, yes. So now you can see the Zimbabwean constitution is rigid and unitary. It does not allow secession, or at least does not speak about it. So the international law does not endorse it, but it does accept it in extreme terms. Internationally, the possibility of us succeeding is to satisfy the three below items. That one, we have to be a distinct people, ethno-cultural identity, and the history. We do satisfy that because we were a nation that was internationally recognized, that was able to send emissaries to other countries. When we know King Lopengula sent his emissaries to engage in a diplomatic level with the Queen Victoria at the time. So we do satisfy that ethno-cultural identity and history. Systematic oppression, number two. We know Gukurahundi, economic marginalization, denial of development, a tribal apartheid, where we do not have any viable avenue of addressing those at a national level because our constituencies, political constituencies, they've been grouped together so that the Shona ethno-majorities will always be a perpetual majority and will always be a minority by design, by social engineering. This is just pure statecraft that's aimed at annihilating our people. So the only solution again, remedial succession. Now, the failure of internal remedies. We know the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission that was established under the 2013 Constitution. It's been ineffective. It's been willing to prosecute any perpetrator of Gukurahundi. The same Mugabe himself, the chief perpetrator, granted those that participated in those massacres amnesty. It cannot be. Mugabe's law or the powers of the president of Zimbabwe cannot trump international law that demands justice when it comes to human rights abuses. So there, remedial succession again is the only solution. If we are a standalone nation, we are able to take the Zimbabwe country nation itself to the International Criminal Court and lay charges, seek reparations, and so forth as a standalone nation. Now, there is a legal basis there that I was just writing that our historical grievances that go unaddressed, where there is selective empathy because we are deemed to be a people who are a minority, when we know that is a lie. The last census of Rhodesia in 1962, people in Matabeleland and Midlands accounted to 3 million, roughly. The same amount as the people from Mashonaland and some parts of Midlands that represent Shonas. If you combine Tongaland and the rest of Matabeleland at the time, the population distribution was evenly split. So this 70% is pure statecraft and propaganda that is even more of a motivation that fully exposes and points to this covert statecraft that seeks to produce a Shona superstate, where unity is interpreted as assimilating to being Shonaness. And we're saying, we do not want to be engulfed into Shonaness. We are a people that have always been a nation with governance structures, a strong military, a nation that had different ethnicities that maintained their identity and their ideology. And the Shona system that was produced in 1931 by the Rhodesians, where every other ethnic subgroup that belongs to the Shona was Zezurized, basically was combined into this Shona super ethno group where the Zezuru became dominant. And that's why in 1980, when others were celebrating freedom from the white colonialist, the Zezuru, together with their sub-ethnic groups, they were celebrating conquest. They wanted to conquer us. That's why in Matabeleland we do not celebrate independence, because to us, we see it as a conquest. The evidence is there, and Gukurahundi was the single most loud enough answer to say we do not belong to this nation. And the only solution is remedial succession, at least for now. Ngizoyivala for now. Bamkhala ngizothi ubaba uNdlovu ayithi fahla fahla kancane.
All right. Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Ndlovu. Over to you. Lokho siphathele khona baba. Baba Ndlovu.
Sanibona baba uNkala.
Okay, yebo baba.
No baba Mpunzi. Right, I thank you very much for what has just been presented. I was listening attentively as Baba Mpunzi was going through his presentation. I have a very short thing to share. It's not really much, but I just hope we can go through this as we, in fact, yeah, we can use this, just this little template that I have here with me. I hope you can see it from your end.
Yebo, yebo.
It says the viability of Mthwakazi independence.
Yeah.
And then the three issues I think that were raised. There was the issue of feasibility, and there was the issue of desirability, as well as the issue of viability. I think I would like to follow them one by one.
Okay.
Starting with feasibility, what does feasibility imply? I took it to mean are the processes that are available for pursuit of this goal able to bring it into being? The goal being the establishment of an independent Mthwakazi state. That's how I understood feasibility. So I'm going to be looking at processes when it comes to feasibility. And then the next item would be desirability. And then the last item will be viability. And by viability, I took it to mean, will Mthwakazi become a viable state if it is eventually realized? That's the kind of question that I thought was being asked. So in my response, that's what I'm going to be addressing. Now, still on that, if I can quickly go back to the issue of where we began, where I say feasibility. I think what has been happening mostly, especially as people have been talking about this Mthwakazi dream, because I think it's a discussion that is now in the public. domain. I don't think there is anyone in Zimbabwe, whether you talk about Zimbabwe as it is currently constituted, or Zimbabwe after the independence of Mthwakazi, or yeah, so there's no one in Zimbabwe, if one would say, who has not heard about the calls for Mthwakazi independence. I think there have been responses and reactions right from the office of the president, even other political parties in Zimbabwe, in Harare, and everywhere else, have said one or two things about this idea of Mthwakazi independence. Even people in the communities, we see it a lot on the social media. People are responding and reacting differently. There are those that are in favor of it, especially the people of Mthwakazi region or Matabeleland. And then there have been very strong condemnations from people that are outside Matabeleland. But I think the bottom line is everybody has heard about the idea. And so it is a subject that is currently in the public domain and people are talking about it. So it's just a matter of what angle they are looking at it from and what sentiment they are expressing about it. Now, then talking about feasibility, that is by way of processes. As I say, I think one limitation has tended to be that most people who talk about Mthwakazi independence have assumed that there will have to be bloodshed, there will have to be a need for a war to bring it into being and so on. I'm not convinced that that is the way. In any case, if that were to be the way, I think it would all be a matter of how it has been handled by the protagonists and the antagonists, everybody involved in the discussion. Otherwise, I think if it is tabled fairly and squarely and honestly in an open platform for people to engage, it shouldn't really lead to any bloodshed. Because in any case, when one reads the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the interesting thing in chapter 14 of that Constitution is that there is already an expectation that secession might take place. That's why the Constitution itself was crafted in such a way as to, the Constitution reacts to the idea. If I can just read through what I have, that is chapter 14 of the Constitution, which deals with provincial and local government. And this is how it reads. It is the preamble to that chapter. It says, whereas it is desirable to ensure the preservation of national unity in Zimbabwe and the prevention of all forms of disunity and secessionism. So in the drawing of the Constitution, there was already an expectation that some sections of the community might want to succeed at a certain point. I don't know whether they already had a certain section in mind or the Constitution was just being open, but certainly there was that expectation that it might happen, which then brings us to the idea that maybe it is not as illegal as people often say it is. I think it's a matter of the processes that may be followed, that would be followed to execute the idea and to bring it into being. So now somebody may ask the question to say, what are the possible constitutional means of bringing this thing into being without necessarily going through the route of fighting? Now, there are constitutional processes, I believe. I'm very optimistic. For instance, I'm not pitching a campaign here, but this is what I've thought about it. This is what I've thought about as an individual. I was thinking to myself, if 2028 comes and I happen to be sent by one of the constituencies into the parliament in Harare to go and represent one of the constituencies from Matabeleland, The first motion I would move personally would be what I call the Mthwakazi Independence Bill. What would I have in that bill? I would push it so that it becomes an act. What would I be pushing for in that bill? I'll be pushing for the adoption of a bill to allow the people of Matabeleland or Mthwakazi to vote at least in a referendum and decide whether they want to remain part of Zimbabwe or not. I think that is something that can be attained constitutionally without necessarily having to fight anybody or cause anybody to do anything. And then the other bill that one would need to push is the one on the amendment of this section which says Zimbabwe is a unitary state and so on and so forth, to allow for consideration of secession. Now, somebody might say to me that the threshold in terms of the votes required to move these motions may be very high, and that Matabeleland from Mthwakazi is just about 38 seats. Will Mthwakazi be able to persuade and sway the parliament in Harare to even consider such a bill? Even if it were taken through the vote, it would fall away because there would not be enough, it would not be able to garner enough support. But remember, the first thing is to go the legal route. So, in the best case scenario, if it does sail through and it gets the sufficient numbers among the parliamentarians, then the matter would be put to a vote, and then the people of the region called Mthwakazi in those selected districts, which would have to be determined with a formula clearly and properly worked out, then those people would participate in a referendum, and then they would be able to, to decide. Would then be able to get people to think about it, talk about it, mobilize for it, get those in the diaspora to come and occupy their spaces, register as voters. I'm sure a lot of people will travel from the United Kingdom, from South Africa, from wherever, any part of the world. If that issue of a referendum over Matabeleland were presented to say, come and vote on whether you guys want to be an independent state or not. Now, as for the issue of the formula to determine who's going to be allowed to vote and so on, I think we can leave it for another day, another discussion. So that's as far as the constitutionally accepted means of bringing secession into being are concerned. So to summarize it, I say would have to move a bill, or which then becomes an act of parliament, the one that I propose to call the Mthwakazi Independence Bill, which would be debated and voted on, and if adopted, then it should lead to a referendum, then people should vote. So that would be a constitutionally accepted process where there is need to amend the constitution to accommodate that. That's the constitution of Zimbabwe. That would also have to be done. Remember, it's politics, and it's also a matter of how you approach all the other sectors of the population to try and persuade them to lend their support to the idea. So instead of shooting the idea down at inception, I think it's a question of scrumming around it, coming together, deliberating on it and finding how best it might have to be implemented. So that's as far as the processes are concerned. I don't want to talk about the issue of violence, because it is not tolerated in international law. You become a pariah once you talk about the use of violent means of attaining any goal on the international scene. You know about the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1929, which outlawed the use of aggression. So right from the time of the Kellogg-Briand Pact and even the decision in the Western Sahara case, it says the use of violence to attain international goals is certainly not an option. So that's as far as feasibility. I think with feasibility, I'll stop it there, having spoken about the issue of, the deployment of constitutionally accepted processes within the Zimbabwean legal framework. And then having spoken about feasibility, I'll then go on to talk about desirability. I think the fact that it's desirable, it's beyond question, because as long as we have one person talking about it, then it's desirable. What happens when there are two or three? The desirability becomes even more evident. And so what one needs to take note of is the fact that, first and foremost, when I talk about Mthwakazi, I want to desist from the idea of making it sound as if it is a reaction to something. I don't think that the calls from Mthwakazi independence are a reaction to something. It's not based on the hatred of anybody. No, it is hate. It is based on the freedom of a people to lead a life of sovereignty on their own sovereignty. So the issue of always talking as if we are reacting, we are angry, we have been upset by somebody, therefore we are reacting to that person. I somehow think maybe it is a narrative that has taken traction, but it needs to be attenuated, because in a way it waters down the strength and the idea itself. Because Mthwakazi independence is not a reaction to any event. Mthwakazi was a sovereign state until 1894, when it was overthrown by the British through the British South Africa Company. So you know very well, we know very well that we are talking about a state that existed before. Even the boundaries are known, they are recorded. Anybody can deny them all they want, but the boundaries are there. Yes, it's called, we hear a lot of people talk about the Jameson line and so on. Some criticize the line and think it's not authentic and so on and so forth. But I think the issue of boundaries can be discussed, and that should not really be a sticking point as a point of departure. Another interesting thing is that, the independence of Zimbabwe was fought by two parallel formations. There was ZAPU and ZIPRA, there was ZANDA and ZANU. And for all we know, even if people may deny it, but those formations seemed to take the forms, shown by this boundary. We know that ZANDA operated mostly nationally and liberated nationally. And the ZIPRA ZAPU operated in Mthwakazi. Even the recruitment processes were very clear. Of course, we know that there were inter-ethnic elements within the military formations, but those were very isolated individuals. Otherwise, in terms of the bulk of the formations and configurations, is ZAPU, ZIPRA, ZANU, ZANDA were clearly, they were the personnel were recruited in the different regions, different territories as we speak today. So we can't really say that there was ever any goodwill towards creating a new Zimbabwe which would integrate all the people that we have as it is. And then the other element that I think we want to talk about is that the neighboring communities have failed to live side by side in harmony. And we are saying Gukurahundi is not a cause for the calls for secession, but it is a sign that coexistence is not in the interest of the people. So it's not because of Gukurahundi that people are calling for secession, but rather people are saying, when we observe the events around Gukurahundi, they clearly indicate and illustrate without equivocation that the attempt by the two subjoining territories of Mthwakazi and Zimbabwe to coexist side by side as one unitary state is impossible. And what about the issue of this occupation of Matebeleland by people from Mashonaland, particularly, especially in the period after year 2000. That kind of, a displacement of the whole population by those from another, rendering Matabele people stateless in the slums of Hillbrook, Berea, and Juvel, and other places, probably Croydon. I don't want to mention those. But, these are clear indications that people have been systematically displaced. So I would say Mthwakazi independence is therefore desirable along those lines. And then, having spoken about feasibility and desirability, I am now moved to take on my last point on viability. The issue of viability, as I hinted earlier, for me raises the question of whether, if this state were to be given independence today, would it be able to survive? I think it is a self-evident fact that there are, well, maybe let's talk about legal viability, political viability, and economic viability, because I think these are these areas or sectors of life where we would need to explore this viability from. Looking at it through the legal lens, I spoke earlier about how the Constitution allows us to seek secession. So I think from now on, instead of us talking as if this were an illegality, we must begin to embrace the fact that it is not inherently illegal. What could be illegal is the use of force as a means to attain it, but not the idea itself. Because the issue of secession is really a political idea like any other. As you began by saying, Mabunkala, when you began, whether we talk about irredentism or we're talking about federalism or whatever, we are talking about a level of self-determination and a quest for autonomy, if one would call it that. So there is no idea which is inherently illegal in itself, but illegality comes in when you now maybe try to deploy unlawful or rather internationally impugned processes such as the use of force and violence to attain that goal. So as a matter of fact, it is not illegal to seek secession. And as I said, even the Constitution has considered the fact, because as you go through section 264, it goes on to say, it speaks again about this issue of devolution of government powers and so on. And it is very, very clear that I'm trying to look for the, all right, section 264, subsection 2C. It says the objectives of the devolution of government powers and responsibilities to provincial and metropolitan councils are to promote democratic, effective, transparent, accountable, and coherent processes and coherent government in Zimbabwe as a whole. And then it goes on to say in C, to preserve and foster the peace and national unity and the indivisibility of Zimbabwe. So there was already an expectation of divisibility. And this constitution was adopted to quell that mischief. Well, they thought it was a mischief. But the fact that they anticipated the mischief is a clear indication that the law itself recognizes, even if it tries to outlaw, that it already acknowledges that possibility. And it is clear that there are underlying factors that could justify this. And section 264 and 265 are designed to try and respond. And this is an interesting effect that this constitution was adopted in 20 13, but now we are in 2025, there's still no devolution act. So that again creates, it actually consolidates the argument that there is no goodwill in terms of getting this process in and ensuring that it is actually implemented as it is. So legal viability is taken note of. The idea is legally viable. And then the issue of political viability, well, I guess we spoke about if we can mobilize the people of Matabeleland in their large enough numbers, first and foremost, to sweep all the 38 constituency seats in Matabeleland so that they represent this Mthwakazi independence voice. And then, having done that, they then go on to seek alliances even outside the region with any constituencies and any members of parliament who may vote in the idea. Then from there, when the vote is done and Matabeleland is given the opportunity for a referendum, then people go on and vote. So politically, yes, it is viable if enough mobilization and lobbying and political education is undertaken to bring it into being. Last but not least, economic viability. I think if in a desert like Botswana is known to sustain itself, what more a country, I mean, a region as rich as Matabeleland, with its rich pasture in Matabeleland South, with gold strewn all over the place, with its natural game we have like Wange and so on. What about the coal resources of Wanki there, the timber of Lupani of Binga, and we have so much. What about the cotton fields of Gokwe? We have a lot really that can sustain a people, even the human resources themselves. So yeah, I would say without maybe further ado, the Montevideo Convention requirements of statehood are also satisfied. There is a permanent population of Matabeleland, distinct and identifiable, very diverse, taking into account all the different micronations within Matabeleland. And so population is there, territory is well defined. And then, so once we have a territory and a population, then issues of governance, if that can be put in place, which at the moment is not taking place because Matabeleland is part of Zimbabwe, how could it have its own government, independent of Zimbabwe, unless that is sanctioned? And last but not least, the ability to enter into diplomatic relations. I think that shouldn't be a problem. So by and large, let me conclude by saying, yes, the idea is viable. People need to come together and look for ways, explore ways of executing the idea. And first of all, to adopt it as a project and to appoint somebody as a project manager to be dedicated to it. To have all the planning, all the timelines, everywhere, everything, draw the Gantt charts and show us what step must come first, second, third, and evaluate periodically as we move towards those timelines. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, Matabeleland, rather Mthwakazi, would be an independent state if we all move in the right direction and implemented the ideas as we see them. May God bless the listeners and everybody else. Good evening.
Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Ndlovu. Yeah. Baba Sosha, you spoke about what you called remedial secession. This assumes that all internal processes have been exhausted and failed. Isn't it so?
Yes, Babunkala, indeed. So, remedial succession follows the notion that there is no other avenue that is viable within the national discourse for people or a people to find self-determination, because self-determination can be indeed found within a nation. But when the nation itself is the enemy of the very same people that seek self-determination, there is no other way besides the people seeking a remedy that falls over and above the nation itself. So,
sorry, before you finish answering that question, Baba Ndlovu, ungastopa ushare i-document yakho ngaba kuhle baba. Ungaqhubeka baba Sosha.
yeah. So as I was saying that the fact that on the national discourse itself, all possible avenues of seeking redress itself, we must again understand, just like Kuba Bundlu was saying, that we are not merely reacting to Gukurahundi and the ongoing tribal apartheid. If you remember, in 1914, the year 1914 and 1914, umntwana came up with this plan again against the British, when they anticipated that we were being amalgamated together with Mashonaland. There was an attempt of raising issues to say we cannot be grouped together with Mashonaland. So essentially, our efforts of being a sovereign state were interrupted in 1893. We see again in 1914, when Prince Nguboyenja attempting to restore that in the midst of colonialism. And we see it now as a mere continuation of that project that was aborted at birth. And remember, Mthwakazi was a fully functional nation that had diplomatic relations. We hear of Inkosi Pengula sending his emissaries to Queen Victoria to negotiate after the fallout of the Rat Concession. So we satisfied the true definition of what a nation is. So remedial action here is first pointed to the British monarchy itself that left us in this quagmire. And secondly, the remedial action is pointed towards the current government of Zimbabwe. If I were to go and present a case as the interim chair of Mthwakazi Political Alliance to United Nations Security Council, it will be addressed to the British government under the pretext of the Crown, and also to the Zimbabwean government that assumed the vices and continued with the oppression or the denial of self-determination of Mthwakazi people, instead of allowing these people to pursue their own self-determination. We are limited now because we've got our own aspirations, our standards of how a modern country should be. But because of ethno-majoritarianism that has been socially engineered by the Rhodesians and assumed by the ruling ethnocentric ZANU-PF, we are unable to do that. Our potential is severely affected, and we are forced to carry the shame of a failed so-called shithole country when we know that as a people we are capable of doing much more.
Okay. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Yeah.
Baba Ndlovu. ngesikhathi ukhuluma uthe i-violence yiyo engenza ukuthi secession ibe illegal. What do you say to those people who say there is no way of attaining Mthwakazi independence without fighting?
I think it's a limited perspective, because as long as we have not explored other means, we can't be very definitive about the one and only way of achieving that goal. As you noticed, Babunkala, when I tried to elaborate on how, in theory, we can pursue that without necessarily going the war way. Because I did say that we first of all, you see, the challenge is we have among our people, politicians, who say that voting is useless. But as I tried to articulate, if you remember, I made it very clear that first of all, we must build a bloc, a political bloc that has access to the parliament. Because the Parliament of Zimbabwe is the only legal institution where such matters can be discussed. So you can't just be stating out there and be saying we want this and we want that, when you have not even presented it to the very body that is empowered with the authority to consider your requests. I hope I'm making myself clear. So those who are saying that it is impossible to attain this goal without a fight, I think it is based on their own limited perspectives and limited understanding, especially of the internal processes that can be adopted. Because you see, you can't go on to fight for something which you have not even formally demanded. Because the next thing, when you are found fighting, people say, why are you fighting? And then you say, so and so is refusing to give me A, B, C, D. They say, but did you tell him? And if you have not told him or her, surely your fight is not justified. Hence, I am saying, first and foremost, the constitutional route must be followed. Then from there, as things develop, that's where other steps may then be taken. But you can't just go on to fight for something which you have not informed the others you need. Let me repeat and say that view to say that it cannot be attained without a fight is very limited, and I believe it needs to be revived because it's certainly not authentic.
Okay, this question goes to both of you. I know, Babandlovu, you mentioned about maybe legal processes or constitutional processes, which will involve what we call the Mthwakazi Independence Bill. However, are there any political processes that people can engage in to push this cause for an independent Mthwakazi? Angize kuwe Babandlovu, then Baba Sosha ubulungisa impendulo now.
Okay, let me put it this way, Babunkai. I repeat what I have already said, maybe in slightly different words. The Parliament of Zimbabwe is the only institution that has the mandate to entertain discussions of this matter, because it is the legislature of Zimbabwe. Even if, for instance, you approach to the president, who's the head of the executive, and he said to you, oh yes, go ahead, he does not have the power as the executive to bring such a thing into being. Because at the end of the day, in terms of the principle of separation of powers, the president cannot dismantle Zimbabwe. He cannot disintegrate it. He cannot violate the territorial integrity of the country, because he has sworn in terms of the oath of office to uphold the constitution and to uphold the territorial integrity of Zimbabwe as it is currently configured. So the president cannot give it to you. Even if you went into court and tried to court you go to court and try to court, forgive me for the pen, court the courts to give it to you. At the end of the day, the interesting part is the court cannot give you anything that is outside the framework of the law of Zimbabwe, because the judiciary is bound to enforce the law of Zimbabwe as it is currently constituted in the constitution and in statutory law. So that then being the case, it goes without saying that the only institution where you need to bring this matter up and get some endorsement is the legislature. Because as I said, if the constitution is amended, it can only be amended by the legislature, by the way. And if the Mthwakazi Independence Bill is adopted, it can only be adopted by the parliament. Then from there, the parliament will be the one to authorize this plebiscite or this referendum, which then the executive and the judiciary and everybody else can assist in bringing into being. But unless the whole matter begins with the legislature, any other attempt, any other political process is a wild goose chase. It's actually seeking diamonds in the wrong places. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Baba Ndlovu. Baba Mpunzi, ngibheke impendulo kaBaba Ndlovu. Even eseyikhuluma isifike eParliament, it means there is somewhere where we should start. Engicabanga ukuthi mina ngama-political processes. Futhi mambheka ukhulume nge-remedial lokhuzeni ukuthi vele yabe nganithiwa isiphumele ngaphandle. But I'm more interested in political processes azokwenza ukuthi i-independence yemthwakazi ibe khona. Over to you, Baba Mpunzi.
Okay. I agree fully with what exactly Dr. Ndlovu just alluded to. Over and above that, from our side, is besides the internal political processes of going to the legislature, we do know that the issues that emanate from the lack of determination from Mthwakazi and the pointers that are stuck, that are there, that basically cement the idea that these are two different countries. One of them being our people being displaced to neighboring countries. They actually, these neighboring countries end up being stakeholders in this whole quagmire. And we can lobby these neighboring countries to say, you are being indirectly affected by a situation where another nation is imposing itself on an otherwise nation that's supposed to be independent from it, where marginalization and statecraft is being used to systematically displace people to neighboring countries in SADC, South Africa, Botswana, and so forth. Zambia, we can go as far as the 1980s, since the actual Gukurahundi mass murders themselves. So we can lobby these countries, these governments, engage them and make them understand, like, look, for example, South Africa, you have been bearing the burden of carrying on your shoulders what you shouldn't be carrying. You are carrying children from your neighbor. These children from your neighbor are from a blended forced family. This blended family means that Mthwakazi children and these other children do not belong in the same family, but nonetheless, the colonial powers did put them together. And as such, the children that deem to be the rightful owners of the home are abusing those children. And when those children say, but we came with our own property into this family, as blended as we are, as we were and we are now, we can say to this neighboring country, South Africa, that it is in your interest to support the Mthwakazi cause, because it means our people that are loitering around, most of them denied economic participation, denied education, who have been relegated to the bottom of the soil of the social hierarchy in South Africa, in Botswana, and so forth. These people, as affected as they are by systematic marginalization and tribal apartheid, they do have a home, and their home is in Mthwakazi. When you help them realize their home, they will go back to their home, their actual nation where they belong to, and re-establish themselves so that they can better contribute to the SADC economy. We can also go to, like I said, global politics, regional, geopolitical political processes, your United Nations Security Council, where basically the political process will be directed at the crown of the British government, under whose hands were amalgamated into Mashonaland. And secondly, to the current Zimbabwean government that assumed the very same vices and actually went on to create mass matter that on its own, that is the very evidence that it is a state that is oppressing another state that does not exist officially. That's why we've never had any international calls for justice or prosecutions of people, the perpetrators of Gukurahundi. We can use Gukurahundi as a pretext to say the internal remedies that can bring redress as far as Gukurahundi atrocities are concerned. I've got no avenue of ever succeeding, because those that are currently in power as things stands are judge and jury in skewed processes that will never allow us to gain true justice, and we see the perpetrators being sent to jail for mass murdering our people, just as is happening now by these secret and covert so-called Gukurahundi hearings. I say international lobbying, international political lobbying, United Nations Security Council, we lobby the SADC. We can as far as go back as to the African Union, human rights, is it the Human Rights Agency and so forth. We can present the same case and explain and satisfy the requirements of being recognized internationally as a state, that as a people that are distinct, or what the United Nations calls a peoplehood, and that we are able to have international relations, and we just need to be recognized by other countries.
Okay.
And a referendum will satisfy that.
All
Yes,
right, Baba Mpunzi, thanks very much. When you talk of Mthwakazi independence, people immediately think or talk about Gukurahundi as the reason why Mthwakazi wants to secede from Zimbabwe. But from both of your contributions, you put it very clear that Gukurahundi, as you put it, Baba Mpunzi, you said it is a catalyst. So it's not the cause. But what would you say to the people who think that way? This question goes to both of you again. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, I'll say first thing is we understand the lack of empathy for Gukurahundi by the so-called ethno-majoritarian in the country. And we do know that that is just one of the highlights that emphasizes the fact that these are two different people. We see Gukurahundi, we interpret it as a nation invading another nation. That's a nation which is Mthwakazi, that is an official nation. So we say fair and fine. Now, we do not see Gukurahundi as a mere tribal act. We see it as the reason why we should have never been a single country in the first place. Secession, had it happened to prior to the so-called independence of 1980, there was never going to be any Gukurahundi in the first place. We are a different people. We're forced to coexist. And the result was Gukurahundi. Gukurahundi only highlights the fact that we're not supposed to be a single people in a single nation in the first place. So we have got no qualms. We are not driven by emotions or the need to revenge or the need to be even. We are saying we are doing this for our future generations, where we know as a people, Mthwakazi, with all its ethnicity, we tested statehood or nationhood prior to the colonialists, and our potential of becoming a nation was interrupted in 1893. We just merely want to continue with that trajectory without being limited by people that we know inherently do not belong to our nation. Our standards for self-governance, our standards for running a country and an economy are totally supreme and above and beyond what we are subjected to. We are limited in terms of our capabilities of what we can do as a nation. I believe if Mthwakazi was a standalone country, would be one of the best SADC countries in Southern Africa. But because now we're being subjected into an ethnocentric and ethno-majoritarian superstate, where there is no possibility of us of pursuing our self-determination and setting our own standards as far as we want to rule and govern ourselves. This just catalyzes again the fact that we know that we only joined in 1923 together with Mashonaland. In 1923, that's when we joined to form Rhodesia. It's not so long ago, and our potential has been severely hampered. We want our children to have the standard, the nationhood, the statehood, and the pride that was snatched away from our forefathers in 1983 by the colonialists. And the Shonas have got nothing to do with this. Shona majority group, the Zezurus with all their sub-ethnicity that have been amalgamated in 1931 for the sake of political hegemony. We've got nothing to do with that. we had always been our own political hegemony in 1913, prior to 1983. That's why we were united and able to fight against the white colonialists, because we had that nationhood, that pride, and we seek to restore that, and nothing much and nothing less. Yabo.
Okay, thanks very much. Babanjo, same question to you.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind reminding me.
Okay, bengithi abantu.
Okay, I think I remember it now.
Oh, you remember.
Right. Number one, before I answer the question, there was a time when you asked about political processes, and Mr. Mpunzi did respond. I also did respond at some point, but as I was reflecting, I think much as we can talk about the international community lobbying, the international community and so on, the great question lies within the internal politics of Mthwakazi, the Mthwakazi region, or the Mthwakazi, whatever territory as you call it. I think until 1985, Mthwakazi had a great voting bloc. Then it vanished, I think, with the conclusion of the unity agreement. Now, people in Mthwakazi are obsessed with what they call the mantra of removing ZANU-PF. So they'll vote for anybody who claims to be, pushing towards the removal of ZANU-PF from power and so on and so forth. And as a result, the Mthwakazi voice has been diluted. And meanwhile, the illusion of removing ZANU-PF still remains illusory. It's a fleeting illusion that I think has been vainly pursued for how many decades, and with no chance, a seeming chance of, attaining it. So I think politically what Mthwakazi needs to do is to restore its voting bloc. If, as I said earlier, we could have Mthwakazi people voting in a Mthwakazi councillor for every ward and for every council seat, for every municipal seat, for every parliamentary seat. Deploy people that are from Mthwakazi in agenda and in orientation and in nationality. So as the politicians like Sosha are going out to mobilize people, I would suggest to them that they restore this Mthwakazi voting bloc, whereby Mthwakazi is able to forge itself into one bloc, which can then speak one voice in unison and make one demand. That is the starting point. And that is one area where I believe there's need for regrouping and reorienting and refocusing and scrumming to come together and hush this voice. And then secondly, you spoke about the issue of Gukurahundi and what a role it plays. There are people who think once you mention Mthwakazi independence, then the issue of Gukurahundi comes up. I think, as I said earlier, that is a very reactionist perspective, and personally, I am very skeptical of it. Because for me, at least as somebody who lived through Gukurahundi and experienced it, for me, the calls for independence were not triggered by Gukurahundi. You would remember that even in 1979 at the Lancaster House conference, there were voices that spoke about this issue of, keeping these territories separate. So those voices, preceded Gukurahundi. They were there before Gukurahundi. And as I spoke also about the configurations of Zapu, Zipra, Zanla, Zanu, they already speak of, demarcation. We have the history speaking very well about the failed and the foiled attempt of Zipa. You know how the Zipra guys ended up being rounded up in Mozambique and in Tanzania and subjected to all kinds of annihilation and massacre and pogrom. And you can also talk about the Mgagao and the Morogoro fallouts. They already speak of this separate existence between these two territories. So to speak as if Gukurahundi then becomes the main reason, the primary reason for independence is actually to diminish such a great idea and to simplify it and present it as if it is just some reactionary idea from some angry and lunatic fringe. Meanwhile, it does not lie at the center, but as I said earlier, it speaks as evidence of the need rather than a cause. So I think the people that go out to talk must not present, that's my own point of view, that this idea of Gukurahundi is not presented as if it is the very frontal idea. Because I have asked some people in the past to say, suppose you then elevate this issue of Gukurahundi so high, the next question will be, if it is resolved and if the perpetrators are brought to book and prosecuted and there is restoration or repatriation I mean, not repatriation, reparations for the people who were affected by Gukurahundi, does it mean then this idea of an independent Mthwakazi state falls away? Because if you present it as if it is only dependent upon the issue of Gukurahundi, I mean, that's an issue that can be resolved. If a government comes in and says we sincerely want to address this thing, we have the power to prosecute every perpetrator and repair every loss and every damage. After that, you would then have no reason to speak about secession if Gukurahundi is the foundation of it. But if you go on to look at countries like the United Kingdom, where not many years ago we had the Scotland question, which was brought to a referendum, and people voted. After they voted, the decision was made. Those who were pro Scotland freedom or independence, they actually lost the referendum, and after that, the matter has been brought to finality and silence. So I think the issue of Mthwakazi independence must lie most importantly not on Gukurahundi, but on a referendum, a legally constituted plebiscite, where the question is posed to everybody who's eligible to vote. They vote, and then the matter will be settled. I think after the vote, the matter will be settled. Because if people have voted to say, no, we want to remain in Zimbabwe, then honestly, there's no reason to go on further calling for a secession. But if people say we want to secede, then the steps must be taken to bring about Mthwakazi independence. I think that's where the question lies, rather than on the resolution of Gukurahundi and so on. Let me reiterate, it is all about asking the question in the most formal way through a plebiscite or referendum, getting the answer not from the politicians, but from the people, because the answer must come from the constituencies. It must come from the nook and the cranny, from the villages themselves. The people in the village must be the ones to decide about their future, not the politician deciding for them that we want an independent Mthwakazi state. So if the matter is taken back to the community to decide, and each one of them is given the right to vote, those who qualify, by the way, are given the right to vote, they decide on their what you call destiny, and from there, everybody must float with that idea, whether it's comfortable or not comfortable. If you've lost the plebiscite, you've lost it. So you must now go with the majority. I believe that's the route that must be taken. Thank you.
Okay. Siyabonga kakhulu. Ngiyazi ukuthi ngesikhathi ubaba uMpunzi esinikeza abenakho ubulalele babandlovu. Njalo ngesikhathi ubaba uNdlovu esinikeza abenakho ubulalele babampunzi. Uma kukhona elingabe lifisa ukuthi liku-engage from each other, this is the opportunity. Angiqale ngawe babandlovu.
Thank you very much. Let me go first. Let me breathe first. Thank you very much, Babu Mpunzi, for all the issues that you raised. You were quite articulate. I think you explored the international law foundation for secession and the right to self-determination. I did not go into that myself. I did not belabor that point because you had already dealt very comprehensively with it. I am very thankful to you for raising those provisions of the law as you shared there in your document. I think those are areas that really need to be revisited because they give a legal grounding on the international scene. I think those are points that must be magnified and accentuated so that anybody who is interested in this matter may always familiarize themselves and talk from an informed position. Because I realize that one of the other challenges with this messaging on Mthwakazi independence is that everybody is talking, but there doesn't seem to be a coordinated voice or a coordinated view in terms of what people exactly want. So I think there is more, there's need for more information, more enlightenment, more focus as a way of, consolidating the voice, strengthening the voice, so that we don't have everybody just rising up and expressing the whole idea in their own ways, because it brings more confusion than it brings clarity, and it also raises issues of fear mongering, despair, the notion that it is impossible and infeasible. It all emanates from lack of information and lack of a focused idea. I think as I kept talking about scrumming and coming together and bringing these, what you call ironing out the ideas, brainstorming them, finding out what works and what doesn't work, and then communicating in that concerted voice, which should be able to then allay even the fears of the people out there in Harare, in Zarabani, in Torashanga, because from what they are hearing, these people from Matabeleland are now, grouping together to fight and destroy Zimbabwe and so on and so forth. So as long as people speak without a coordinating voice and without a clear view of what they want to see happen, it scares even people out there who then might want to resist an idea that even, who knows, help them. Because personally, I believe that everybody in Zimbabwe, like it or not, is a victim of this bungling of two states, which shouldn't really be together. There is no development in Mashona. And I believe an independent Mthwakazi would actually give freedom not only to the people of Matabeleland, but to the people of Mashonaland as well, because they themselves also are facing the challenge of being bundled together with people in a situation that has led the country to a state of fight and loggerheads for the past 45 years. But I believe if there was homogeneity, if Zimbabwe was to be left as a homogeneous community, and Mthwakazi were given their own independence again as a homogeneous community, I think these two subjoining territories would have less reason for antagonism, and then each would concentrate on development within its own space. And as a result, we could then end up with greater levels of development in Mashonaland as well, that is Zimbabwe, as well as in Mthwakazi. So to summarize, I believe that the people of Zimbabwe, that is Mashonaland, are as much stifled by this bungling as the people of Mthwakazi or Matabeleland. So I believe that arguably splitting these two territories would create an environment conducive for development in both regions or in both countries. So this independence is not only for the sake of Matabeleland or Mthwakazi, but it will also help the people in Mashonaland. But if you communicate in ways that help them to understand that we've been in a state of conflict, tension, suspicion and mutual suspicion for 45 years without progress, I think they would also understand it. And I believe they would also buy into it because they also need progress. At the moment, no one is progressing. Everybody is stagnant and stuck together in this kind of matrimony, which is not working for anybody. Let me stop there for the time.
Okay, siyabonga. Baba Mpunzi.
Yeah, now I would say what Dr. Ndlovu said, in particular with regards to the people themselves voting in a referendum. I think to add to what he had said there, that is a good point. Knowing that that is a political process and it involves campaigning, political lobbying, and we do know the history in this country called Zimbabwe. The history of political interference, where group gatherings, where people wouldn't necessarily be able to motivate and agitate for the need of succession amongst the affected constituencies. So that would be something that will need to be taken into consideration, and the conditions under which this referendum will take place will need to be internationally monitored by observers to provide true legitimacy to the process itself. Having said that, I do allude again to the fact of speaking with one voice. That's why, just to highlight, is MPA, we are working on a project, Dr. Ndlovu, of a commissariat, a school of politics. Where under the Mthwakazi People's Alliance, we are calling all political parties to send representation for their members to come and get politically educated and get their voice molded to push this so-called Mthwakazi agenda in unison, so that we avoid confusion, just like what our Dr. Ndlovu was saying, where Gukurahundi is being used as a precursor to the succession agenda, when we do know that succession itself has always been an agenda, even against the British rule itself. We did at some point in 1914, like I said, Umntwana Nguboyenja attempted to do that. So those things must be highlighted. And again, in a situation where ethno-majoritarianism, ethnocentrism is the mainstay of political hegemony, it is to the good of everyone, including Mashonaland, that we be left alone, because now the statecraft that is in play is essentially where the government that is ethnocentric is using so much state resource and statecraft in an attempt to keep their foot on the neck of Mthwakazi citizens, in an attempt basically to prevent us from rising, because they do know that we are a different people. The constitution does allude to it, and it means the government of the day in 2003, at least that administration, has always been anticipating that there is a need, or there is this question that has always been there. We are saying in a friendly tone, is Mthwakazi People's Alliance is, not in an aggressive manner. We're not gonna say it like the way that Mugabe said it. We're gonna say, please, please, people from Mashonaland, keep your beautiful Zimbabwe and let us keep our beautiful Mthwakazi. We can all coexist peacefully. We can all gain. You can learn from us what we mean when you say high standards of governance, and perhaps we can learn from you. You can teach us one or two things about governance and local administrations and things like that. But there is no other way. For the sake of peace in the region, given that the Mthwakazi diaspora is spread across SADC and the world at large, the selective empathy that is based on the fact that Mthwakazi is a minority is neither here nor there. I just wanted to dispel that myth. That is just statecraft at play and propaganda. Mthwakazi people have been displaced to SADC, South Africa, Botswana, and the world at large. If we were to call for a referendum, all these diasporic citizens will come back, and our true numbers will be reflected in actuality. So we are not that few. We know in 1969, Mthwakazi and Mashonaland were actually 3 million roughly each. So given even the atrocities of Gukurahundi, we are not that far apart in terms of population distribution and demographics. So we say to you, Shona people, we love you. Please, let us go find our own destiny. You have found yours. If you have not found yours because of tribalism, Shona hegemony under Zezuru, or whatever kore political tribal hegemony, please, if you are Ndao Manika, found your own self-determination. We as Mthwakazi, our self-determination is under Mthwakazi. We are the Kalanga, the Tonga, we are the Venda, all the ethnicities that Mzilikazi put together and fought as one against the white colonial masters is what Mthwakazi is. People in Mashonaland found your own self-determination. Do not interfere with our processes, with our resolve to seek our own self-determination, but be concerned about yours. Do not hide your own self-determination under being a Shona, because besides being a Shona, we know you're Zezuru, you're Kore, you're Manika, and so forth. Just as Mthwakazi has got the Kalangas, the vendors, so-called Ndebeles, the Shanganis, the vendors, and so forth, the Sutus and the Tswana. We can all live in harmony and learn from each other and let's live. Thank you, Ngiyabonga.
Okay. Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Mpunzi, asibonge futhi nakuBaba uNdlovu. Mbona hayi isikhathi sesidliwe likade. Ngicela usinikeze amazwi akho okuvala baba. Ngicela with under 2 minutes. Then after that uBaba uNdlovu naye uzosinikeza wakho okuvala.
All I'm saying, I'll say is I'll speak of the People's Alliance, the agenda. As in closing, we're inviting all like-minded people who are involved or want to participate in politics, political parties themselves. The Political Alliance is not a political party. We are a grouping that seems to be, that seeks to be a holding company of all political parties, where the directors are the actual leadership of the very various political parties that we have. We are inviting you to come together. Our future is certain, and instead of complaining about the hate that we have suffered because of tribal oppression, we should highlight and sell the vision and the idea of Mthwakazi. what kind of nation do we want it to be? What economic policies do we seek? What fiscal policies do we seek? What education policies do we seek? What modern economy will allow us to compete in the global modern village? This is the vision that we should be selling to our constituencies so that we get all the votes and all the seats in parliament and at least be able to go and table that Mthwakazi independence bill so that our people can seek and get the freedom that they need in our lifetime. Ngiyabonga Babunga.
Siyabonga Baba Sosha, and ngiyathemba ukuthi baba uzolithola ithuba lokuthi ukuze nje sizoxoxa nje ngeMthwakazi People's Alliance kabanzi ngayo ukwenzela ukuthi abantu bayi-understande kahle ukuthi inhlangano emi kanjani. Ngiyathemba ukuthi uzolithola lelo thuba ngelinye ilanga sibuye sixoxe ba. Baba Ndlovu, amazwi akho okugcina ba.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity once more to share on this platform. Let me close by saying that the first stumbling block to the implementation of the Mthwakazi idea and the growth of the Mthwakazi agenda has been Abathwakazi themselves. And why am I saying that? They seem to have begun to operate right from the word go. They operated from a position or an assumption of impossibility. They assumed that it was going to be impossible to achieve this idea. So that's why even people who are talking about war and fighting and saying it's impossible to achieve this idea, it's because they began with a notion that it was a difficult idea to implement, that it was an impossible idea to implement. And what needs to happen is a shift in mindset that this thing can be achieved if only people look at it positively, not from the point of view that they have to fight to get it, but that they have to persevere in order to get it. And like I said at some point, the more people talk about fighting, the more we have this anti-Shona rhetoric. It creates an impression that Mthwakazi is all about hatred of Shona people. And honestly, you can't blame Shona people for then beginning to fear that idea, because it is made to sound as if it is against them. But meanwhile, it's not against them. It is for something rather than against something. So, you know, when people operate with a negative energy and it brings in that friction, and it always prevents things from moving forward. So unless and until people start looking at the idea from a positive angle, not from the point of view of hating someone, but of wanting to achieve something, then they will certainly be in a position to achieve whatever it is that they seek to achieve. So in other words, you are not seeking Mthwakazi because you hate someone, but you are seeking it because you love something. Let that be the message. And if it goes out that way, it will attract more supporters than any other. You know very well that the dried flowers of a flower attract more bees and more bees than anything else, whilst the stench of the dead attracts more flies. So what are you attracting? It is your position and your attitude which determines whether you will attract the breeze with your bright petals, or you will attract the green bomber with your stench and smell. So what perfume are you wearing? That's the question for Abathwakazi. Goodbye. God bless you all.
Hayi siyabonga kakhulu asibonge kakhulu Mthwakazi kaNdaba zinhle ingxoxo ezikuleli zinga siyabonga kakhulu kubaba uSosha, sibonge kakhulu kubaba uNdlovu ngalokhu abasethulele khona. Siyathemba ukuthi Mthwakazi kaNdaba kuzosiza ukuthi kusicijise, ngoba uma singazicijisanga sizothola ukuthi sisebenza sibuyela muva. Kanti this is possible. Independence kaMthwakazi is possible, and it will always be possible. Yona liyani mentality ebekhulunywa ngubaba uNdlovu yokuthi vele nje thina sesine self-defeating mentality, yiyo manje sokumele silwe nayo. Asibonge kakhulu Mthwakazi kaNdaba, asidibane futhi kwezinye inhlelo zeMathebula Broadcasting Corporation. Okankala umntwana uthi khumu.